I keep it inside of me. Yeah, I keep it inside. It's killing the man in me. Yeah, it's killing the man. Keep it inside, I keep it inside of me. Yeah.
Welcome to yet another episode of the Crisis of Manhood Podcast with me, your host, Peter Mukuka. And for today, we'll be looking at a very, very important topic, and that is the identity crisis of manhood. And to unpack this conversation, I am joined by none other than Pastor Paul. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and good to have you all viewing us this morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're viewing us from.
I'm really excited. At the same time, I think this is a conversation that I think a lot of men out there need to hear.
Yeah.
And I think the issue of identity is something that a lot of people are struggling with, either knowingly or unknowingly. But that's something that I feel like is a very important conversation to have. But I think our viewers want to know a little bit about you, sir. We've known each other for quite some time.
Yeah.
I think for
Since I came into Lusaka.
yeah, so more than 10 years, maybe close
13.
to 15. Yeah, they're about.
13, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I respect you a lot.
Thank you, my brother.
First of all, for your passion and dedication for the gospel, but also even someone who is passionate about business, entrepreneurship. Yeah, and I know that you have done a lot in terms of building people in different areas, especially around leadership and many other areas.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can just share a little bit about you. And I know you have a book written, right?
Yeah, the book. It's interesting sometimes that I forget that I've actually written a book.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you so much, Peter. I'm glad to be here. I think, like Peter has said, I've known him for almost just 13 years, not almost for 13 years. When I just came into Lusaka, we were together at church. And I remember, I don't know if you remember that you started the cell when you were in Matero. And I was a member of the cell band. And the cell, let's not say it died, it just transitioned. Yeah, so I've known him for quite some time. And I mean, not because we are on set, I equally respect you. And just seeing the work you're doing with the Men of Honor is very inspiring work. It's purposeful work that I've seen you very committed in doing, and it's great. So, well, I'm Pastor Simujayangombe. I'm a pastor, and I do business, and also I work for Zambia National Public Health Institute as a project coordinator for the Global Fund. And then also I'm married to an amazing woman, Mary. Yeah, and together we've been blessed with two amazing children, Timothy and Hannah. I like he said, I'm very passionate about leadership. I strongly believe that the purpose that God has given me is to help people discover their purpose, equip them, and then create platforms for them to be able to do that. And I've continued mentoring, especially mostly young men. I actually have a group of about 12 young men that I mentor, just in the line of leadership, but even around life. Yeah, and I'm a Rhema graduate.
And former director of the
Oh yeah, I'm a former director for Rhema Bible Training Center, Zambia. I was a campus director there for 3 years and some months. Yeah, and that experience actually from Rhema, working for Rhema, really did shape my leadership. And I think my passion for leadership, I'll even talk about it later on, identity and all, was really shaped through the training I got from there. Yeah.
I actually get a lot of positive feedback from the Rhema graduates.
Yeah.
I think there's something about the program. My wife actually did
Yeah,
the program,
I
and
thought I
see a lot
will.
of yeah, awesome, awesome.
Yeah,
And I think you and your wife are actually doing amazing work in terms
thank
of
you.
just empowering young people.
Thank you.
And I think that's something that we ought to admire and emulate,
Yeah.
just to sow seeds in people if we are to see better and empowered communities.
Yeah.
And so, and just to dive into our topic,
Yeah.
maybe we can start from just the definition. How do you define identity
Yeah.
from both the biblical perspective and also maybe from your own personal
Perspective.
perspective? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think somehow I will merge the two. So when I think about identity, for me, really, it's the characteristics, attributes, and traits that define an individual, which then influences their worldview, how they relate with people, how they relate with themselves, how they relate with God, how they deal with circumstances in life. Then I think, even from a biblical point of view, if we're really going to talk about what identity is, we then have to go to what we call the first mention, in the Bible. If you read Genesis 5, verse 1, I think up to around 3, 4, the Bible says that, and this is the genealogy of Adam. For God made them male and female and called them Adam. And you realize the interesting thing is that Adam was not the name of the male guy, but Adam is the name of humanity, with human species, and then divided into male and female. And the Bible goes on to say that he made them in his own image. And so I think when we really think about that, now going back to Genesis 1 again, where the Bible says, and God said, let us make man in our own image after our own likeness. So I think, again, if you really think about it, who is man from a biblical point of view? A man is someone who carries the attributes, the traits, the characteristics of God in them. And I think that's why Jesus even came, is to come and restore the identity that we lost through sin. So at the end of the day, whether we go through the Bible route or the other, just my own definition, I think it's more of somebody's characteristics, attributes, and traits that then influence how they see themselves and deal with life. Yeah.
Wow. And just moving on to the next question, have you personally gotten to a point where you felt like your identity was challenged?
Yeah, I mean, yes. And I think, like I said, Rhema really did help me to get to that place of fully understanding my identity. I have many times, I think if I look back, even just my upbringing, one of the reasons why I found myself in drugs, alcohol, and dating, as much as I could, was because I had an identity crisis. The definition of manhood that I had compared to what I really believed in the belief systems I had was very different from what I was being exposed to. I struggled quite a lot as a young man growing up. Now, even after I got born again as a Christian, I did really struggle a lot with my identity until I did a course called Search for Significance from Rhema that then helped me to fully understand that I'm enough just the way I am and how God created me. And there's no mistake in how God created me. I've had lots of struggles even with money. You're doing a business, the business is not growing. You've seen your friends who've done businesses, their businesses have grown. Struggled sometimes where your friends are driving, you're not driving, you're still using a bus. Sometimes you don't even want to tell people that I'm leaving because you don't want them to see that you're going to the bus. Yeah. So you wait for people to go so that you can jump on the bus. All of those, for me, I think were serious identity issues that I have gone through. Yeah, even as a pastor, I have had struggles with my identity. You want to preach like a pastor who everybody says they're eloquent. You want to teach like them. You want to dress like them. So I've gone through lots of those. But one thing I would say, it's taken reminders of what the Word of God says about me, and remaining resolute in that.
Yeah. I think personally, I have also experienced that,
Yeah.
and maybe almost everyone goes through that phase. Um, I think when you're growing up in an environment where there's so many challenges and all that, and then now you get to a place where you go, like maybe you go to church and everyone is speaking English, and
You can't speak
you can't
English.
speak good English, and you feel like maybe this person is just quiet and they're
Yeah.
they don't talk to so much.
Yeah.
But deep down yourself, you know that you're afraid, you're scared, and you feel like you do not belong.
You can't express the thoughts, though they
Exactly.
are there.
Yes. Yeah. But I think that's something that a lot of people actually are going through.
Yeah.
And now looking at men, because I feel like identity, personal identity, is very important, and
Yeah,
especially
true.
for men,
Yeah.
because also maybe I think it also determines how someone behaves or responds to his environment.
Environment, yeah.
So maybe just taking you to the next question.
Mm.
What do you think? What do you think are some of the main causes to the identity challenge or
Okay.
the identity crisis, especially for men?
Yeah. There are quite a lot. The foundation is the upbringing, because, we live from the abundance of our belief systems. So what you've been taught, what you have been made to believe about yourself has a huge bearing on how you perceive yourself and how you live life. So your belief systems, based on the exposure of the knowledge that you have, really has a big foundational bearing. And then pressures from the society where we are, because society has predefined manhood in a particular way, and I think I've had to go through those moments where I defy what society has set as a standard of manhood. For example, you find that when growing up, it's more apparent that the definition of a man is more of doing the hard things, the hard work. Of course, our bodies are designed to do the hard work, but what if I'm much better in cooking than I am in slashing? You know what I'm saying? That my wife should go and slash if you can. Praise the Lord. Yeah, but I think it's just the societal standard definition of manhood that also has really put a huge. It's messed up the design of manhood. Um, Other things is just the definition of manhood from other men. How certain friends of ours have defined what manhood should be. A man should drive, a man should be able to put on such a particular dress a certain way. A man should have this number of girlfriends. A man should be able to do this. Those definitions really affect the way men see themselves. But I think the biggest of them all is the drift from the Bible. I mean, when I really look at how God defines what manhood is based on what the word says, it's one of the biggest reasons why I think there is a huge crisis for manhood.
Thank you for that. So maybe just to expand a little bit, I know
Sure.
you've touched on it, but how do you think societal expectations distort the man's identity?
Yeah. Big time, big time, because I think the expectation of society, unfortunately, is more of outward output deliverables than the input, So society really has placed a huge burden on men, which some of the expectations are not realistic, And also, I think I wanted to say the approach of generalization when it comes to manhood, really from society, is one of the biggest things that has impacted manhood. There are certain expectations that are placed on men by society, which can not sometimes help certain men because they do not even have the capacity to meet up certain standards that society is placing on them. So society really does play a major role in either reinforcing the right standards or the gap. And I think for me, partly from the societal point of view, when I talk about manhood, it's also it's a reflection of the fathers and the older generation and how much they have deposited into the young men that is being expected of them by the very society that is placing a demand. You know, we have situations where parents are absent, male figures are absent in the upbringing of their children because society, first of all, has programmed them that the main role of the man is to go and look for money so that they bring the money in the home. Then the main role of the woman in the home is to be the one to raise the children. Now imagine a female figure raising a male figure. The nutrients and deposits that are required for a man to be formed are missing because the woman doesn't just have those nutrients to feed into the young man, young boy to grow up. So you find that most fathers have been made to believe that their main role is out there, being a champion in the world, but yet coming back home, shrinking back on the phone, being in the bedroom, not having conversations with their family. So first of all, the distortion on the older generation has now trickled down into the younger generation. And even now, what has been modeled as fatherhood, even to the younger generation, is not healthy. And so what we end up looking up to is I want to be, when I grow up and become a father, I want to travel as a father. I want to bring money back home as a father. I want to drive a big car as a father. And so if all of those things are not there, the end result now is a crisis. Somebody now begins to think of themselves having certain, somebody begins to feel like there are certain things I do not just have. You know, I don't have the capacity and requirements of me to be the man that I'm expected to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a conversation that we were having in the previous episodes, looking at the role of fathers in shaping children, of course, but specifically for the boy child, to learn how to lead, how to be empathetic, to learn how to do all these different things, and also just having those conversations, because in most homes you see that the fathers are in their houses, in their homes, but they're not there in terms of the presence. You know, you are an absentee dad, yet you are in the house. You know that. You know, and I remember back in the day, you know, there were some fathers, not in my house though, of course, but from other families, or you know, even just the neighbors, where the fathers had even gotten nicknames, you know, like Saddam. because when the father comes home, everyone's campus. You know, but yeah, I think it's very important, and that's something that we can challenge fathers out there. You and I are raising young kids right now. What are some of the practical steps do you take intentionally to help your children? Let's talk about your son in particular. To just help him, you know, build his character, you know, to strengthen to find his own path, his identity, and all that.
It's actually very tricky, but there are certain things I've learned, small things. I believe the small things, I don't know, I just like small things because I believe they usually become the things that are atomic explosives in people's lives, you know. Some things I do with my son is to ensure that I do not generalize when conversating with him. You know, society has a way in which we generalize things. We say boys don't cry, you know, boys are strong. I don't like to use those words on him because it's not true that boys don't cry. You know, as a man, crying does not make me weak. It's just an expression of my makeup, my emotions. You know, a healthy man can and should cry when moments for crying arise. It doesn't mean that the man is weak. So I try to have conversations with him that don't point him away from who he is, you know. Of course, even in dressing, I try to make sure that, of course, the school helps. So I try to take advantage of some of those. Oh, blue is a color for boys. Not that blue is a color for boys, really. It just helps to reinforce the manhood that is in him. Yeah. So spending time with him, I like, when I'm fixing things, I like to be with him and pass on. Maybe it's a screwdriver, I'll tell him, pass me the screwdriver, and he's with me. Those things just to try and reinforce, you know. But also, one of the biggest things I do is I hug him. I tell him that I love you. I tell him that I believe in you. I speak into his life. I tell him you're going to be a great man. You're going to be a great leader. You're going to be a great dad. I tell him what I think should be given to him as a little boy who is going to grow up into a healthy man. So I do that quite a lot. I go with him to the barber shop. I don't think that there are times, a few times he has gone to the barber shop alone. And he actually is very much aware of the fact that boys go to the barber shop, and then the sister is very much aware of the fact that girls go to the salon. So it's just those little steps that I do. Another thing I like to do to just keep showing up as a dad intentionally to him is to make myself available for certain school events that I can be available for, and pick them up and drop them off from school. I believe strongly that that has an impact on how he views just life, and how a man should behave. Sometimes what's interesting is even when I'm not around and their mother is driving them, he will be the one guiding the mother. No, mommy, don't pass there. No, we are going to go in water and the car will switch off, So you can tell that he's consistently observant. And then there's language I just never use. Not that I speak, not that I insult when he's not there, but there's just things I intentionally don't do in his presence. There are movies I just do not watch in his presence, there are just certain things I also do not do in his presence just to help him to reinforce the manhood in him. Yeah. And then sometimes I check out the cartoons that he's watching to make sure that he's not watching a cartoon that's going to tell him that he's actually a girl when he's a boy. Yeah, so it's just things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there's so many parenting styles. None which you can say, okay, this is the perfect one. But I like the fact that you are taking intentional steps to spend time with your children. I think children learn best by seeing, by looking, and not simply do this, don't do this, do that.
True.
And from what we do, from the kind of fathers we are, I think that's something that they're going to pick a lot more than the things that we're going to tell them.
Yeah,
do
true.
this and don't do that.
Spot on.
And we've seen that even as you mentioned in your explanation about young men who are struggling with identity because they have placed their identity in the things that they do.
The achievements.
Yes, the possessions and all that. What would be your message?
To a young man out there. So first and foremost, as a young man, I think one of the things you need to know is that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. You are handsome, you are creative, you have all that you need within you to be the best version of yourself. And it's about accepting yourself to be who you are, accepting your height, accepting your complexion, accepting your accent, accepting your background, accepting the reality of your life, and then beginning to find ways in which you can be able to improve yourself and become a better person. It's also about finding the right men that you can be able to learn from, who can be able to build you up into the responsible man that you're supposed to be. I think one of the things is to build your identity well as a young man is first of all to ensure that you know that you are not your achievements, you're not your deeds, you're not what you do. What you do is a product of who you are. And so if you're going to change what you do, you change who you are. You focus on improving yourself. When you improve yourself, then your outcomes and your outputs will be changed. And also just learning to say, look, life has got processes. It's got a pathway. Each one of us are walking our own pathway. I may have a car today and my friend doesn't have a car. That doesn't mean that I'm more intelligent than my friend. It just means that life has happened. There are certain principles that my friend has applied that have worked for him. And if I applied the principles, I can also be able to get that particular phase of life. But really, it's more about just accepting who you are. And then once you accept who you are, you take a stock take of your life. There is what we call the Johari window. You look at your private self. When you are alone, what are some of the things about you that people don't know about, which are actually eating you up and destroying you from the inside? Things like masturbation, things like, pornography, the private sins or the private things you do that are really affecting your identity, because those things really affect our identity. So it's looking at those things and wanting to begin to work on them, looking at your work that you do. What's the quality of work that you do? How can you improve on the quality of work? So just really taking a full stock take of yourself. And sometimes when we say accept yourself for who you are, we're not really saying settle for less. We are saying be content with who you are as a person, your makeup, but seek intentional ways of improving yourself. Yeah. Growth. Simply
Very
just growth.
important.
Yeah.
You talked about how young men place their identity in their possessions or the things that they do.
Yeah.
And now because of the digital world, social media. I remember one time, I think I was early on in my professional journey, and I was looking at, every time you go to Facebook, you'd see this person, has bought a car, and they're celebrating. This person is graduating. This person is, all these achievements everywhere, and it just became a thing to me. I decided to just go off Facebook. So I had to suspend my account for like 6 months. I was off Facebook. That was a long time ago.
Wow.
But yeah, I feel like a lot of young men out there are really struggling because there's a lot of artificial lives that people are portraying on social media, and not everyone knows that that's artificial, and so it's affecting a lot of them. How can you advise young men out there who are being influenced by that?
I think the first step is to do what you did. Go off social media. I mean, that's exactly what we were talking about when I was saying doing a stock count. I think for me, again, I'm going to go back to the fact that it's about, first of all, knowing who you are. Maybe let me backtrack. One thing I can say is, look, one of the best places you can find a sense of identity is purpose. Finding your purpose in life, knowing the reason why you exist. Once you get to a place where you're fully persuaded about why you exist and you're so sure about it, and you begin to apply yourself towards that, anything that happens outside that cannot easily influence you. Influence and pressure will be there, but your response towards that will be far much mature and far much better, because you really know why you are where you are and why you're doing what you're doing, so you won't be pressured by your friend. I'm found in a space where a lot of people are doing PhDs, they're doing masters. Almost every now and then somebody's graduating either with a master's or a PhD, and there are times I've been tempted to try and jump on a public health masters because it's sponsored, and I've always had to ask myself, why do I want to do that masters? Do I want to do that masters because it's going to make me a better person and it's going to help me in the fulfillment of my purpose, or is that masters simply going to also make me have a title I can go about throwing some weight within the organization and in the world to say I have a master's? And I think because I'm very resolved in my purpose, I'm very confident in what I believe I've been created to do. I'm confident in my gifts. I'm confident in my capacities. I'm confident in everything that I am. I do not feel like I'm incomplete simply because I have something that a friend has that I don't have. Funny enough is I remember 3 months ago or something, my car had a serious problem. It was almost breaking down every other 2 weeks. The car is breaking down. And I remember one day I was at the office and the battery had now completely run out, and the car would go in and out to the mechanics, so I didn't really know what the issue was. The mechanics couldn't know what the issue was. And I remember one time somebody said to me, as a project coordinator, how can you have a car that can be jump started? Why can't you buy a car, And in that moment, few seconds in that moment, I really felt, I'm suffering. As a project coordinator, I'm supposed to actually have a Hilux. I'm supposed to have a Ford Ranger. But when I really thought about it, I asked myself, why don't I have the Ford Ranger? That's because I've decided to make certain investments, which some people are not making. Others, praise the Lord, are making investments where they can even afford to get a Ford Ranger. But with where my life is, there are investments that are more important that I've decided to make than to buy a new car. And you know what? I just laughed it off. Did the battery, and of course I found out later on that my son would he would pretend to be driving like me. Then when he's in the car, he would open the fuel tank, get a hose pipe, put water into the car as a fuel attendant. So I never knew that, so the car kept on going to the mechanic until he found out. And again, I found out because I have conversations. I try to have conversations. So it's when we were conversing, father, son, as boys, that then he was able to tell me, oh, dad, I can do this. I do like them. A few attendant, and I put water. And ever since that thing was done, from the moment I found out, it's been resolved. The car has no more problems anymore. Yeah. So I think it's being attuned to your purpose. Why do you exist? Why are you on earth? The true essence of manhood is more about living your purpose, fulfilling what you have come to fulfill, the lives that you're impacting and changing. That's the true essence of manhood. And the impact of life, I think when I was reflecting, one of the things I thought is, look, the impact of life begins with, first of all, knowing what you've been created to accomplish, then leading in that space. And I think even when leading our wives from a place of manhood, it will lead from that place, from a place of purpose. I jokingly say this, that what, God created Adam first to manifest so that Adam can have leadership experience before he could bring Eve along, so he could lead her. I just kind of like to see it that way. Yeah, so I think it's you, if you want to be a young man who's not easily influenced by peer pressure, find a purpose. And the purpose is something that you want to do for the greater good of other people. I know I've talked a lot, but one last thing. One thing I know about purpose is that purpose also helps you to be disciplined, not to engage in certain things you shouldn't engage in. It just helps. So if you are purposeful, you will not think of someone who is driving a car to be doing far much better than you. If you're in your line of purpose, you're content with what you're doing, your identity remains intact.
Yeah, I like to say not everything that is good for you.
Yeah, even Paul says it in the Bible. All things are good, but not all things are beneficial. That's in Romans chapter 9.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those insights. And we did have a conversation on purpose in the previous episode. So if you're looking at discovering your purpose, we tackled that in the previous episode. So just look out for it. And so I think that there are quite a lot of men right now, actually older men, who are still struggling, discovering finding their true identity. Any few words that you can give to them?
Well, I think I would say that look, get born again. That's the easiest way to find your identity. The most secure source of our identity is from our maker. It's from the one who created us. What gives this podcast an identity is your brain. You define what this is, and what's what gives it significance. There are many podcasts out there that are being done, but what gives this podcast an identity is what you intended for it when you designed it. And that's the same thing with us. It's how God created us, how God designed us. As a man, you've got to understand that whatever that you need, God created you with everything you need inside you. And whatever you're going to experience in life is already on the inside of you. You just need to learn to develop yourself and cultivate. And also, look, manhood is not defined by the number of children that you have. It's not defined by the fact that you have a car. It's not defined by the fact that you have a girlfriend you're dating. Manhood is defined by the fact that you're a male species created in the image of God, living in this world with so much that you have to offer. And I think that's how you've got to be able to view yourself. I am more than enough. I am content, and I think, look, what would really help a young man to become to step into manhood is also finding men. Sometimes we struggle because we have not opened up to other men, or we have not found men who we can look up to, who reveal manhood. I know sometimes we don't even know what manhood looks like, but there are men like Peter here that you can really look up to and learn from them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you're doing a fantastic work, taking on some men, young men, to mentor and support and help them find their path. I think that's a challenge to every man out there, to always think about, okay, can I identify even just one young man that I can mentor, but also even for the young men to be intentional about identifying older men that can, can provide that mentorship. Well, when you're talking about things like this, time really flies. Yeah, but before I let you go,
Yeah.
what do you see as some of the critical implications to having the identity crisis?
Crisis. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when men are not secure in their identity, even how it affects how they show up. It affects how they lead. It affects how they view themselves. It affects how they relate with people. It has a negative impact on their sense of worth. It has a huge impact on their potential. It has a huge impact on them fulfilling their purpose. So the consequences of men not stepping up into their manhood is that we are robbing the world of a species that makes it a balanced world, because God designed the earth to be ruled by male and female. And the male species, the man, in the manhood species, there are things God put there that are only to be done by by men and never by women. The leadership crisis that we are seeing all over the world is because men have left homes. Men are absent fathers. Men are still struggling to discover who they are, and men are still struggling with their identity. They haven't gotten to a place where they are very secure in who they are and then running their race. So the implications are great. It affects the younger generation. It affects the parenting system in the world. It affects our societal system. It affects the political system. It affects everything. When men are not fully secure in the identity of their manhood, it has a huge impact on society in general, because manhood has got, and I'll say this because I know I've said, manhood has got something that God has placed in them that makes this world balanced, makes this world become the best version of God's standard for it. And if that is not there, the implications are great. Yeah. I I do look back at my own life and I think about how some of the things I was meant to believe as a young man, now those affected my life, how they impacted my life negatively. But I'm glad, I'm thankful to God that after going to Rhema, I really got to have a proper understanding of what a man is. Even just the concept of a man must provide, a man must provide. It has a very huge bearing on how then men show up even in their homes. Because think of this man who has a salary of 20,000, the wife has a salary of 40,000, and then the man is told you must provide. What does he do with the 20,000 that can't even match up to the wife's standards who's at 40? So it's about men understanding that your provision doesn't define you, but you define the provision. Yeah.
That's powerful and profound. Well, thank you so much. I think I still have to digest the information. I think
Yeah.
I've really learned a lot personally, and I think the issue of identity is not something that you can say, okay, now I've graduated, I'm
Yeah.
done. Every day you are learning something new, even about yourself that you
Yeah.
never even knew. So it's good to have these conversations. I trust that a lot of people will learn a lot
Thank
from
you.
this. So as we conclude, do you have any last words?
Well, my last words to everybody is thank you for joining us. And I ask that I've heard you mention quite a number of podcasts that have been done, the Purpose podcast, the parenting,
Yes.
and different other podcasts. Join in these podcasts, listen to them. But really, one thing I would say to every man out there is that, first of all, accept yourself for who you are and be content with who you are. And then after accepting and being content with who you are, and then start just improving on yourself, start working on yourself, start investing in yourself, and do not let anything that you do define who you are. We say you are not what you do, but you are whose you are. So focus more on whose you are as a definition of who you are. Fall in love with yourself. Be happy about where you are, what you have, and then start working on making yourself become a better version of yourself. Focus on growing yourself and investing in yourself rather than what you don't have. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for joining this episode. This has been the Crisis of Manhood podcast, and we were looking at the crisis of
Identity.
we are looking at
crisis.
the identity crisis of manhood. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and also if this information has been impactful to you, please don't forget to share it widely. It's bye for now.
I keep it inside of me. Yeah, I keep it inside. It's killing the man in me. Yeah, it's killing the man. I keep it inside of me. Yeah, I keep